Welcome, nutritionradio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry, a university nutrition professor of over 20 years and podcast host of long-running shows like Iron Radio. Come on in. Hey, everybody. Well, welcome to Season 2 of Nutrition Radio. This is a longer format like we've been kind of commenting on in past weeks. And, well, let me start with who I am. If you haven't checked in with us before, I'm Lonnie Lowry. So I'm a longtime host of a sister podcast called Iron Radio, which we're revamping right now and getting back on the airwaves in all the necessary ways, just kind of revitalizing. It has been going on for the past couple of years, but I had to step away for, some industry and consulting reasons. Anyway, so longer format, we're still going to do these little 10-minute segments here. We've got food trends, breaking science. Then we'll either do a listener question or some type of weight management tip from our co-host, and we're going to get to Chrissy in just a minute here. And then we're going to end with a rant or a product review or even a recipe. So rant, review, recipe at the very end. So you could still have these little 10-minute clips. It's just that they're going to be all in one episode, which is a little bit different than we did in Season 1. So who am I? I am a food industry consultant. I'm adjunct professor. I was a full-time professor for over 20 years, now just doing podcasting and adjunct kind of things and industry consulting. And I'm a former competitive bodybuilder. I don't usually talk about that a lot on this podcast. That comes up on Iron Radio. If you're into sports nutrition, that one's going to be probably more for you. Anyway, but let's get to you, Crystal. So a little bit about you, maybe?
All right. So, I'm Chrissy or Crystal Schumacher. I actually was one of Dr. Lowry's students. I have a bachelor's degree in exercise science. I currently help run a daycare in Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm also currently back in school to go to physical therapy assistant path for my hopeful future career. Cool.
Now, what made you choose PTA when you got done? Did you not want to be a trainer, or you just wanted the licensure? What were you into with all that?
So when I originally went to school, it was always the goal to end up in physical therapy, regardless if it was physical therapy with my doctorates or, the assistance portion. I've always really enjoyed helping people. I've always wanted to work in a medical field. I just didn't know how to get there. And so when I started school, they keep you saying, there's a wide range of things that you can do with exercise science. And I'm not going to, go into that because I have learned so much. I've learned a lot about the body and nutrition, and I've always enjoyed my time in school. I just didn't know what to do with it after school. Being able to kind of overlap my enjoyment of the body and how the body works and bringing exercise and fitness into that. I just thought physical therapy was still ideal. I kind of got straight off the path a little bit, just due to how the world was and what my personal life would allow. And when I finally got back into it, honestly and truly, I couldn't be happier with my decision to go back.
Good.
So.
Yeah. Everybody, we're going to have 4-week stints with different co-hosts. I thought about Chrissy. Well, she's obviously the first one. She's done research before. In fact, we're going to talk about some coffee research today, and she's done some coffee research. But it's great to get a fresh perspective from students, former students, entrepreneurs. These people bring all kinds of ideas, right, that can be used for product development or just general education or whatever it might be. Fresh ideas from crowdsourcing like this. And so instead of an interview, let's take 4 weeks and work with Chrissy and get some cool info. So having said that, let's start with our first topic here.
Market news, food and fitness trends.
Now, you said you've been seeing something repeatedly in the marketplace. What is that?
So using superfoods and super powders as not necessarily a, substitute for foods and things, but to enhance them.
Okay. Are you drawn to this personally? Do you see this on Facebook? How are you seeing this? Like, why do you think it's a trend?
So I see it a lot on Facebook. I know, and being a student too, just with my personal life, with being so crazy, I've been trying to do better with meal prepping and things like that, which is difficult. And a lot of the stuff that I've been seeing as far as like recipe goes for like overnight oats and things like that, just like simple, quick, easy things that you can prep ahead of time, they do use these superfood powders.
Mm-hmm.
And I've not necessarily been hesitant, but just trying to figure out, is it necessary? How do they benefit us? Is it good for weight loss? What is their purpose? Is it additive? Just to be there? They're pretty pricey. So, for
Mm-hmm.
somebody that has a lot of background in research, thank you to you. I try really hard to kind of look through things before I just jump on and try to follow. So, it's just something that I've personally been trying to get more information about since they have been coming up so much more.
It's a great topic. I wouldn't have thought about this. One of the sponsors at the ISSN meeting that I just got back from was a greens powder company. And it's funny, but I don't know if you were you in the nutrition class where we would look at that. There was a movie called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, and the
Yes.
guy he's all about juicing green veg, And there are times where I'm like, you know what, I really haven't had any fibrous veg today, believe it or not. I need to purposely do this. I might have had oatmeal and berries for breakfast or done different healthy things, but like, what about specifically like the greens kinds of stuff, you know? And so there are days where I'll slam some green juice. I usually get one that's more like a fruit based one, and then one that's more like a lower sugar, just all vegetable kind, and mix it together to try to dodge the sugar. But that's been my approach. But like you said, it's pricey. Now, I looked at the Mayo Clinic and the Cleveland Clinic for some ideas here. Surprisingly, both of these sites, they'll talk to dietitians like myself or other people, and they're, here's what we think. They sort of embrace this idea of superfoods, but not necessarily as the powders. And I think what you're talking about is more like the packets and that kind of stuff. There was a November 2021 piece from the Cleveland Clinic. What is a superfood anyway? And they actually talk about that, how it's not a real category. Like from the Institute of Medicine or the FDA, they don't say, oh, superfoods are a category. Obviously, they're going to be things that offer extra vitamins or minerals or phytochemicals. And I think it's that last thing. It's the polyphenols. It's all the colors that you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also a little torn on this whole greens powders thing, to be honest with you, Chrissy, because the vitamins and minerals and some of the polyphenols, that sounds good. I don't think you're ever going to talk to somebody who's in nutrition and they're not going to say, go for the whole food instead. Like, what are you missing when you go get these greens products? It's actually hard to say because of processing and everything else. I know polyphenols are hard to work with in food products and stuff, but antioxidants and polyphenols seem to be the big one. This piece from the Cleveland Clinic does talk about everything from, the usual go-to, acai berry, blueberries, beets. And they do talk about the dark leafy greens. You get stuff like vitamins A and C and E, folate and that kind of stuff. I got to think it's a good antioxidant boost in some way. One of my concerns with these things, if they could be loaded with certain phytochemicals that could have like food drug interactions. Like I know quercetin or quercetin, it's in onions and grapefruit. It slows drug metabolism. Well, that's kind of weird. So when you buy these products, it's one of the things that make me think about it. It's probably a good way to get some of these phytochemicals, but I don't know.
And it's just a thing, but you have to think of like, what else will it do to me?
Yeah, yeah. Now you said you have bought them, or
I have not yet. I've so there's these shakes. They're called Kenko shakes, and they're supposed to basically be like a superfoods shake, but it's a powder. Different than like the naked shakes with like the different fruits and vegetables just mixed in. And I had been trying those for a while before I had just went straight to the superfood powders. And I have to say, aside from the taste being not up to par, I don't they don't fill me up like the other things do. So it's just for something to say like, it has all of the nutrition aspects. But how much of it do I need? Not to say that I'm going to have that instead of, having a salad or, overnight oats, but these things are supposed to be added into there. But if I'm already putting these berries and stuff in there, then why is it needed? Why do I need to get it?
Yeah. Yeah. I've got to think it's mostly these antioxidant, like the polyphenols and stuff. I do wonder what you're missing. Like somebody might say, well, what is this different? How is this different from the whole food? Well, that's kind of hard to say because of the different companies and how they process things. And I mean, obviously, you're not going to get the fluid that you would get from, the fruits or veg or some of the carbohydrates, probably. Maybe you're not after that. Maybe you're just after the micronutrients, vitamins, minerals. The truth is, a lot of these phytochemicals are not even, they're not nutrients per se, right? They're just helpful when it comes to things like the way you metabolize something or like I said, an antioxidant effect or whatever. This piece from the Mayo Clinic is specifically talking about cruciferous veggies and how they're a big part, of these sorts of things. Antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, that kind of thing. There's so many. I mean, we should probably make a huge list and just put it out there. I mean, there's just so many phytochemicals. There's like resveratrol and anthocyanins, like the blue stuff in blueberries, and like we said, quercetin or quercetin. And there's just this huge list of things, sulforaphane in cruciferous veggies. There's just a ton of things. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe we could just get listeners, hey, send us a question. You can send an email. You can check us out on Apple, on iTunes and stuff on nutritionradio.org. But we'll leave a comment on YouTube. You can find Nutrition Radio and Iron Radio on YouTube and leave us a question or even a statement about, do you use some of these products? I have a whole bunch of freebies from the ISSN event. So, I'm going to go ahead and use those. But yeah, I've never actually bought them. Although I have bought, like I said, the jugs of stuff just from like the produce aisle in the grocer.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's a good topic. And it's one that's been around, I think, for a while. It just depends if the Gen Pop is getting a hold of these ideas or not, I think. All right. Next up, our next topic here.
Breaking nutrition science.
And this is one that I think you might find interesting. Some of the guys on Iron Radio, but I actually want to look at the source study here with Chrissy. It says drinking coffee gives a special boost to the brain beyond its caffeine content. Now, when you listen online, people are trying to interpret this in all different ways. Is it some placebo effect from the coffee? Is there something else, one of these phytochemicals in the coffee, right? Like chlorogenic acid is on this list too. It's a big player when it comes to coffee. What's going on, right? Because what the study did was it took some habituated coffee drinkers, and that's something you got to think about in coffee research. These guys drank at least a cup a day. This is a study from Portugal, and I don't want to completely reproduce what we did on Iron Radio, but the idea here, and this was published in Frontiers in Behavioral Neuroscience, is that caffeine boosted areas of the brain. They used functional MRI. So parts of the brain will light up where there's the most metabolism, and you could kind of see working memory and goal-directed behavior areas lit up more than just with caffeine and water. And again, you could think about that as a whole different way, explanation. Maybe it is the phytochemicals. There's lots of things, hundreds of things in coffee that aren't caffeine, but maybe it's the smell. Maybe it's the experience of drinking it. But yeah, they did these MRI scans before and 30 minutes after they either did a cup of coffee, and they didn't define the cup of coffee that I can find yet, or just like caffeine and water. They had them relax, and then they did the brain scans. And it's just interesting that coffee and caffeine both affected some aspects of the brain, but only the coffee affected the ones that's more connected to, they call it advanced nerve network controlling vision, working memory, cognitive control, and goal-directed behavior. So before I pull any quotes out of this paper, you've worked with coffee before. What are your thoughts about coffee versus caffeine? Do you ever take just caffeine, or do you drink coffee, or how do you do it?
I made it through my undergraduate degree due to caffeine. So, no, I am a pretty avid, I enjoy a nice cup of coffee, as much as, the next person. I was a huge caffeine, I did energy drinks, those 5-hour energies, all of that stuff. And actually, it was until we did our research with you that I was like, wow, these are horrible for me. You know, if I can get better benefits from just drinking a glass of coffee, then why would I not just do that? So I've actually been much better. I don't get it as much. Sometimes I do crave, you know, the flavor that comes with them, but I, you know that as far as sugar wise, as far as what the actual caffeine will do for my system after it's been metabolized with just a cup of coffee, I don't need the energy drinks or the caffeine. I've never taken like a caffeine supplement.
Okay.
I know a lot of people that have from working at, you know, the YMCA and stuff like that. A lot of our more strenuous weightlifters and stuff like that, they'll do that instead of doing like a pre-workout or something like that. They claim that they have more energy, and I don't want to say one way or another, or that, you know, they feel like they are able to mentally do more. But yeah, I don't know. I stick with just coffee. I try at least.
Yeah, it feels like to me it's probably a better overall choice because of all those antioxidants, right? I mean, you can find literature that says Americans get more antioxidants from coffee than they do from fruits and vegetables, which kind of ties back to our first topic, right? Like, why are you taking greens powders? Because people don't eat fruits and vegetables here in the U.S., sadly, not enough. Let me just pull a couple of comments from this paper. This is from Maria Pico Perez. Coffee consumption decreases the connectivity of, there's a part of the brain called the DMN, at rest. So they used functional MRI in a group of habitual coffee drinkers. It says the connectivity in nodes of the higher visual and right executive control network of the brain is increased after drinking coffee. Data also show that caffeine intake only replicates the impact of coffee on another network in the brain called the posterior DMN. So again, what is coffee doing? My question for future research, you know what it's like. Every time you answer a question in research, it begs 3 more questions. And mine would be, you know, we got to tease this apart. Like, they did not do a decaf group. They just did coffee versus caffeine and water. So, you know, it all depends on what kind of question you're asking, I guess. Let me just offer a few things. It says, only limited information is available about the impact of coffee intake on the whole brain network activity. Functional magnetic resonance imaging, or functional MRI, allows us to study in a non-invasive way the function of the human brain during the execution of specific tasks or at rest. Now, they did resting people. I'm interested in this as like part of a pre-exercise. I don't know how you get a functional MRI in the middle of a workout. That's for future researchers to figure out, I guess. But it says recent studies suggest the impact of coffee on brain functional connections at rest, prompting a functional reorganization toward more efficient network properties with implications for things like emotions, alertness, and action readiness. And as you pull through this paper, I don't want to read all this stuff, but again, they're looking at the effects of coffee versus caffeine. It says connectivity of the posterior DMN, so that's more of a default network, is decreased after drinking coffee, and caffeine did that as well. It says while the connectivity in nodes of the higher visual and right executive control network is increased after drinking coffee. So again, only the coffee affects some of these higher centers. And I don't know if it's because they're enjoying the smell of the coffee. What's going on with that? Is it the other compounds? Again, it's decreasing, and so is caffeine, certain parts of the brain, certain connections, but only the coffee is increasing this other portion of the brain. It says our observation that coffee, but not caffeine, impacts the connectivity in these networks is interesting, as higher functional connectivity and executive control in visual networks may underlie cognitive control, etc., could be contributed to other components in the coffee besides the caffeine. And that's what I was interested in, of course, because some of that stuff in coffee, we've looked at how it might reduce blood sugar, you know, after a carb challenge, and or, you know, alertness and all that kind of thing. Do you think a lot of, well, you're probably like, you know, you're late 20s. So, and you're like, are you Gen Z? I'm trying to figure this out here. You're probably Gen Z. Are you old enough to be a millennial? I'm not sure.
I think I'm right on that cusp. I think I'm
Okay.
still technically considered a millennial. It's weird to
Okay.
think that I'm in my late 20s.
It is funny. Uh, but yeah, you said you'll go for coffee over the caffeine.
Yes.
When you exercise, when you get a chance to, do you ever use a stimulant before go time, or is it coffee? Is it nothing?
So as of lately, no. When I was, you know, in my younger 20s,
Hmm.
I had a tendency of getting, what were it? Oh boy. I would do like a drink, like a pre-workout drink almost, whether it was, one of those like shots of coffee, like an espresso shot before, or,
Right.
again, in my earlier 20s, I guess, I would drink like a pre-workout shake or something like that that had the large amounts of caffeine. Sorry.
Okay. Kind
And
of like a kitchen sink kind of thing.
yeah.
Hmm.
So more recently, I try really hard to I have a hard time with hydrating myself. So I've been
Oh,
sticking mostly to waters and things like that. But I have been noticing more of like Alani drinks and those types of drinks coming out, and they're not supposed to have as much sugars and things like that. So I know a lot of people that do still do, whether it be coffee or, these pre-workout, pre-done drinks beforehand. So
hmm.
personally, I try to not, just because also it keeps me in a tizzy for quite a bit. But
Hmm. It's a good point. I don't think I would have brought this up. So I'm glad that you did. That so many of the coffees that are available commercially, they're sugar bombs. Like I don't want, like my bias is when I brew coffee, I just drink plain black coffee, you know? And I have some colleagues that do that as well. And I need to remember, like I was just in a gas station just yesterday, and I'm trying to find a coffee just on a little road trip I was on with my wife, and I'm like, these are all so sugary. I don't want that. So they're almost desserts instead of coffee. And it really is important how you define a cup of coffee. And I know you know that, but
yes.
like black coffee, that's coffee. It's not some caramel macchiato sugar bomb with 40 or more grams of sugar in it. That's a really good point. And how would that affect all this too? Like, the external validity of all this matters is like when you go out and actually try to apply any of this research, how are people actually getting their caffeine versus their coffee? I know specialty coffee is a big trend, but yeah, a lot of times it's a lot of sugar bomb, stuff in a jar or in a can in a gas station kind of thing. It's just such a different market. You've got these people who are sort of the coffee snobs, and I guess I'm one of them. Like I'm just trying to taste the different flavors in coffee, in a dark roast versus something else, Ethiopian lighter roast, whatever, almost like a wine taster. And then there's the people who they just want maximum stimulation before they lift, almost kind of the fitness crowd. People have different flavor expectations, or maybe people don't care about sugar as much as we do. But I would think that along with some of these sugar bomb energy drinks, it's got to be a huge source of sugar for a lot of people. If soda pop consumption is down, these things are up. And I don't know. You do have to think about all this other added crap, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, yeah, so cool study on how coffee might differ. In fact, somebody on the ISSN webpage, and maybe I'll bring it up next week, I'll pull what they had shared, suggesting that it might be better as a pre-workout as well. Okay, so that's the science part. Next up,
A listener question of the week.
this is from Dave in the UK. Thanks for sending this, Dave. This is pretty chewy, but that's what Nutrition Radio is for. He says, I wondered if you've seen the recent article on retatrutide. This is one of those GLP-1 agonists. So not antagonist, right? Because I just heard someone speaking at a conference and they got that wrong. This is an agonist. This is something that's going to stimulate that receptor, among other things. It does other things as well. This is just published in The Lancet, a very top-tier journal, days ago. Listeners, if you're not familiar, and I know, Crystal, you said you've known some people who were on these meds. Weight loss is the big deal. There are drugs like Ozempic, and there's different ones. And one of the things they do is they kill your appetite, and they help with weight loss, like quite a bit. So that's what he was saying, that basically a lot of these drug companies are shouting from the rooftops that the weight loss is up to 17%. Now, that's a lot. I mean, that's really a lot. So I weighed just about 200 pounds. So 10% for me would be 20 pounds. So you're talking about more than 30 pounds lost off of someone my size. Oh my God. And reduces fatty liver and all that kind of stuff. A lot of these studies are done in diabetics. And I think we need to keep that in mind. Like usually the primary variable they're looking at is like hemoglobin A1C. How gummed up is the hemoglobin, the protein in your red blood cells? He says, my worry is the incessant focus on weight loss and not fat loss, right? So Dave's getting at this idea of body composition. Not all studies are going to look at body composition in the same way. I mean, body mass index or just scale weight, his comments here is, you could reduce calorie intake or protein intake, certainly below a level that might be optimal for saving your muscle mass. And that'll lead to overall body weight. But you could have the same body fat percentage, arguably, or even more, arguably, even though you're smaller. You could be a smaller but similarly flabby, right, version of yourself because even after you've lost all this weight. He says, what's your take? Admittedly, it'd still be a win situation if diabetes is involved, but wouldn't it be better if you didn't have to rely on drugs? Like, what are the nutrition implications? So I looked at this paper. This is from Julio Rosenstock, who's an MD, and his colleagues. And I'm just going to set this up very quickly. According to current consensus guidelines for type 2 diabetes management, body weight management is an important aspect for maintaining glycemic targets. And then they talk about specific GLP-1 agonist that also does these other things and how it lowered body weight. Again, this was a study done with diabetics. The body weight was sort of a secondary variable they were looking at. And sometimes these drug companies, and I think this was, funded by, Eli Lilly. One thing I wanted to say about this, it says that retatrutide doses of 4 milligrams and greater decreases in weight were significantly greater than with placebo. They did, however, have mild to moderate gastrointestinal events, nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, constipation. Well, yeah, I guess you wouldn't eat as much if you're nauseous all the time. Their interpretation was that people with type 2 diabetes, this drug, retatrutide, showed clinically meaningful improvements in glycemic control and robust reductions in body weight. That goes back to Dave's comment about sort of shouting from the rooftops. What do you know about this? What do you know about some of these GLP-1 meds, Chrissy?
So most of the people that I know, they do specifically are on Ozempic. As a personal opinion, and please take it with that as a grain of salt, it's a personal opinion. I think it's attractive to people. Why would we have to, exert our energy working out, doing exercise and stuff like that when I can take this medication and, lose weight? And I think that's something that is exciting for people now because, you see these ads of you don't have to go to the gym to lose 30 pounds. And for somebody that does have an exercise science background, doing medications, like the medicational aspect, the chemical reactions that it causes in your body, and at that point, you just have to look at, is it worth it to you? Like, is it worth, having the side effects potentially and things like that? Am I not saying that it hasn't been helpful? Absolutely not. Now that you are losing this weight, you're feeling better. Let's go to the gym and, figure out a way to feel better in this aspect. I don't know how specifically.
No, it's a good point. Like, especially with the exercise thing, like, I don't know. I mean, we're both exercise physiologists. At some point, I'm almost a little bit disturbed that it's going to be pop a pill instead of have the discipline and lifestyle and behavioral changes to go to the gym or go for a walk outside or a hike or get, although I think we both know exercise alone without dietary changes, the effects on overall body weight are actually pretty minor. They're long lasting, but they're minor. In fact, we did a little 10-minute episode on this in season 1 of Nutrition Radio, but what's the real impact of exercise by itself? But you're not just exercising for the body weight loss, right? Exercise is going to improve body composition, sort of to Dave's point, as opposed to these meds that his concern is, if you're under eating and you're nauseous, you might not be getting enough protein, or maybe you're losing muscle mass or whatever. I wonder if something like that's going to come back to bite us in the butt. there's just sort of this ethical dilemma that, yeah, just pop a pill, don't go exercise. And because exercise is going to change you from the ground up, more mitochondria and more capillaries and better heart function and all this kind of stuff. And I'm not sure, a shortcut is the way to go. Now, a lot of these studies are about diabetes. And if you lose weight, yeah, things like blood sugar control improves just from losing weight. Your blood pressure will improve just because you lost weight. Uh, so that's good. But I don't know. Do you think this is pop a pill instead of go to the gym?
To me, I, again, take it with a grain of salt. I do think that. I think the portion sizes are much smaller. But does that necessarily mean it's more filling? Because for other people that I've known that are taking Ozempic for the weight loss, it is a lot more snacking and stuff like that. I guess at that point, it's just making sure that you have the discipline and knowledge to be snacking on things that are appropriate. So for people that don't, how is this helping you? How is this helping you?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Exercise releases endorphins and things like that in your body to make you feel good. You need nutritional substance. And if you're not getting that, I don't know. It just, to me, it seems not like a cop-out, because I do think that it is extremely helpful for people, to begin and, maybe start the process.
Mm-hmm,
but also you're putting your body essentially at risk for the different side effects for, if you're taking other medications, those drug on drug adverse reactions, the drug on food interactions, depending on the kind of nutrition you have. I don't know. It's a double-edged sword. First, rather do the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, it's a good point about the food behaviors too. It's not just pop a pill instead of go to the gym, potentially, right? It's also pop a pill and eat less because you're less hungry. And I've seen some different fitness websites talking about this, like, I can do intermittent fasting and do all this stuff. And when I go back to eating after fasting, instead of wiping out 2 hamburgers, I'm just not hungry. And it's like, well, yeah, but then you're just eating less of the same foods that probably aren't best for you, as opposed to changing your behaviors. But I can also see this could be a bridge over troubled water, right? You said something made me think about that. Like, while you're learning better nutritional habits or eating or exercise habits and that kind of stuff, this is something that would almost definitely cause weight loss while you're doing it. Ideally, right, you'd want some kind of visit to the nutritionist or something like that to try to balance out, like, teach these behaviors. Joey Antonio, Dr. Jose Antonio, he was one of the co-founders of the ISSN. He said that to me once. He's like, supplements, people rip on them all the time. And I think this is a drug, of course, but this is in a similar category. But they can be a bridge over troubled water. They might not be the end game. And I think that might be the concern with some of these things, is whether it's this new one that Dave's talking about or some of the existing ones that are all over social media and the news. I don't think it should be the end game. It could be supportive. And like you said, it depends on the side effects and that kind of stuff. If you're really nauseous and it's causing a lot of problems, and it looked like it did cause quite a few problems, even though all the metabolic benefits, it's not just satiety. These things cause metabolic benefits in other ways too. So they can be good things. Of course, it depends on the drug. But yeah, it's a chewy topic, Dave. So I appreciate you sending that in. You wouldn't want to do something like kill your appetite and then not be getting enough protein. I mean, Gail Butterfield did a lot of that work back in the 70s, I believe it was, or 80s, that when your calorie intake is way down, your protein needs actually go up. So you better change your eating behaviors and try to make yourself get more protein in if your overall calorie intake is really down. I mean, if you want to save your muscle mass. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So that was a chewy one. Our last segment is the rant.
Rant, product review, or recipes.
So I know you had a couple of things that you wanted to share. What do you got?
All right. So as I said, in my introduction, I was an exercise science student. And again, for somebody that really enjoys learning the body and things like that, exercise science seemed just like the right way to go. I just kind of wanted to talk about what to do with exercise science and then kind of just what I was told we could do versus the reality of it.
No, that I think that's great. I mean, because we're going to have students listening to this podcast, of course, and they could benefit, I think, from people's individual stories. I mean, I know I had a lot of sunshine blown at me about you can do research and you can work in healthcare settings and this and this and this, but it's not a licensed profession, right? So without a license to practice, because exercise science, there's no actual profession of exercise science. And somebody, by all means, fire me a comment if you want. You can email me. It's lawnman7@hotmail.com. You could do it through our YouTube presence if you disagree. But I would argue there's not even an actual well-paid profession of exercise science. You could do strength and conditioning. That's probably one of your best bets. PT or PTA, like Crystal's got more experience than I do with that. But you could be, $50,000 to $100,000 in debt with a college degree, and you're not going to go get a $50,000 or $60,000 a year job out of the gate with just a bachelor's in exercise science, right?
Right. No, and that was, when I had started, I had a game plan in my head. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to go the route of PT. That's great. Things happen though. People don't always get into PTA schools right out the gate and things like that. So what my situation was is I wasn't ready to go back into grad school. It was right in the midst of COVID that I graduated, and I just decided, it's not what I need right now with the chaotic things going on in the world. I needed something that, was not putting myself in a more stressful situation.
Right.
And I remembered walking in for my preview, and, everybody's like, oh, what are you going to major in? What are you going to do? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to be an exercise scientist. I had no idea what the heck that meant. I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to exercise science, and then I'm going to go to PTA or PT school, and I'm going to do all this stuff, which was a great plan. And I learned, honestly and truly, I could not say more positive things about my experience academically in school. I was on a number of different research things. I was able to meet so many people and do so many things. So I don't want what I'm going to say, ever make anybody feel that I didn't appreciate, because I learned so much and I was able to grow so much specifically because of my bachelor's degree in exercise science.
Crystal, if I can, I should also clarify, I'm not against exercise phys as a major. It's unique in that you have to have a broad range of some biology and some chemistry. You get all these lab experiences that not a lot of majors do. It's hands-on problem solving. You see stuff for real. You're poking and prodding other human beings, right? And if you want to go into something like physical therapy, I honestly believe it's probably a better choice than something like a bio or biochemistry where you never get your hands on actual people. Mm-hmm. Range of motion of a joint, or what's a normal blood pressure reading, or any number of different things, metabolic measurements and things like that. Body comp, right? We were just talking about body comp. This comes into all kinds of topics, all kinds of areas. I think it's a great major, but it kind of becomes a stepping stone. That's what you did, right?
Yep. And that's exactly, to me what it was. It was a stepping stone, because a lot of the stuff that I am learning in physical therapy assistant school is stuff that we did in undergrad,
mm-hmm.
about, appropriate, like blood sugar readings, things like that. Our entire project where we worked one-on-one with our clients, mm-hmm. I never would have thought that I could be one-on-one with a patient, but that gave me an experience of, what? I am responsible for this person. This is what we're going to do. Being able to see them grow and things like that. When I graduated, I wasn't using that as a stepping stone. So the things that I thought I was going to be able to do with it, the athletic training, that's a separate certification.
Right.
Being a gym.
Like a gym owner, right? A CSCS, right? Like the strength coaches. Those are all additional work. Now, you can get some certifications, I imagine, while you're an undergrad. But yeah, compared to the licensed professions, and like one of my thoughts about PT and PTA was always that the salaries are good because insurance companies pay for it. right? You get third-party reimbursement. And in personal training, yeah, you can be a personal trainer or a strength coach that works at a PT clinic. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure there are personal trainers who make lots of money, especially I think if they live in a metropolitan center or on one of the east or the west coast where there's lots of population. You can charge more money if you're very charismatic. There's probably ways to go about it. But again, I feel like there's a little bit of sunshine being blown at these incoming students because, to your point, you don't even know what an exercise scientist is. You don't even know that athletic training is a separate, that's a license. Again, it's like PT or PTA or like nutrition and dietetics like I did. That's a separate license. In some ways, I almost felt like a traitor to my own profession because in my heart, I'm an exercise physiologist, which includes a lot of nutrition and metabolism and that kind of stuff. In fact, oftentimes I rather talk about nutrition and metabolism with another physiologist and talk about a lot of the mechanistic stuff in the human body than necessarily, just a dietitian per se. Not that, that can't be good too. But what you're saying is important. In fact, I did a rant on this. You don't know this, but a couple of months ago in season 1 of Nutrition Radio, I did a rant about this. Like I was concerned about what students are getting or not getting. I mean, for a while, I was actually the president of ASEP, the American Society of Exercise Physiologists. And that was one of our big things, trying to push the ACSM and other groups to professionalize. Because what's happened is your skill set is valuable. And yet exercise as a modality has been adopted by the sports dietitians, the strength coaches, the PTs, right? Other health professions. So I don't know if we're going to get licensure. I think that's probably wishful thinking that all of a sudden these other groups are going to give up part of their scope of practice. So exercise physiologists can get licensure through their state boards, and that's what a lot of people need to realize. It's licensure legal. Like that's a legal recognition. It's not the same thing as a certificate. When you want to get licensed in something, it usually means better salaries and more opportunities. Like anywhere you go, you're going to say, I'm a PTA. They're going to be like, I know what that means. Come on in. Let's see your resume, as opposed to if you're an exercise scientist, you could have gone to a school with vastly different backgrounds because they don't have the same type of accreditation making things even. You can go to one university and it's almost pre-med. You go to another one, it's more like phys ed. And I'm not making judgment calls on one or the other, but that's really different stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's because exercise science, it's not as standardized as a lot of these licensed programs.
Yeah.
So what would your advice be then for incoming freshmen, or people thinking about the major?
Yeah, definitely have a plan. And again, plans change and things like that, but just make sure that you know what you're getting into. Again, my education in exercise science has allowed me to do a lot of amazing things that without it, I don't know that I'd be able to, The courses and things like that I've had to take are very similar to what I have to take now. And so it is helpful. Just make sure, though, that you know what it is specifically that you want to get out of the program. If you want to go into and start working, with pro athletes and stuff like that, as far as athletic training, then maybe think about what specific leeway you can go an athletic training program. And it's a great program too, I'm sure. I've known tons of people. One of my closest friends went through the program, and she works at a high school right now, and she loves it. So just make sure that you know, A, what you're getting into, and B, what you want to do. And if it's something that you don't know what you want to do, that's okay. Just make sure you have all of the facts and not just the shining, shimmery facts.
Right. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's almost a conflict of interest for some schools with declining enrollment. And you're seeing that a lot in Ohio with the Ohio universities is because there weren't as many births 20 years ago, there's just the declining enrollment. Plus, some families are leaving the state. I've heard it called the brain drain here. Anyway, if there's declining enrollment, it puts pressure on the profs in a program to kind of want to sell the program. Yeah, I feel like they need to be as honest as possible with what you're saying. You better have a plan that goes beyond just this, unless you're really convinced that you can do something that doesn't require a license. Maybe it is you're just a super fit, super extroverted salesperson kind of your personal trainer, or maybe you go into some kind of medical device sales or pharma sales or something like that. There's different things you can do But yeah, I do think, to your point, the incoming people, admissions or exercise science faculty, they need to be really clear that you better have a plan. You better start networking and getting certain certifications that you can now, maybe when you're a senior, undergrad, whatever it is. And that if you want to make licensure level salaries and hedge your bets, you're probably going to have to retake very similar courses to what you're taking here. And that can be weird, right?
Yeah.
I know you and I have both done that. Like you go on to further schooling and you're like, they want you to take this course. You're like, I kind of did that. And they're like, yeah, but you didn't do it from us. And if you want a degree or a license from us, you got to do it our way. It's a little bit of an injustice, but at least you go into it and you've already done it, right? Yeah. I mean, you probably felt pretty confident with some of those like anatomy and physiology type courses, huh?
I really have. My biggest one, I don't know if you remember when we took human movement and we talked about origins, insertions, actions, innervations of the different muscles.
Right.
I'll tell you, that class was probably one of the most difficult classes I had ever taken. I took a class called kinesiology for my program that I'm currently in. I'm telling you, down to the book, down to the project, the exact same class.
Right.
And I was like, you know what? I got this.
You're right. At least you have the confidence,
Yes.
Yeah, so that's one real advantage, I think, of an exercise science program. You get the hands-on, you get a lot of classes, and even if you have to duplicate them, you're going to be confident. Yeah, more confident. Okay, everybody. That's going to be it for today's episode. We'll be back next week for 4 more segments like this, and we'll see you then. The NutritionRadio.org podcast is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, check with your physician, nutritionist, or qualified exercise physiologist in order to make the progress that you need.